Welcome to Midlife Interrupted and Unfiltered.
I'm Melissa, coach, counselor, and professional truth bringer.
And I'm Ann, trial lawyer, accountability partner, and certified Pilates instructor. Yes, really.
We're two East Coast women who met at kindergarten drop-off.
And 15 years later, decided that midlife needed a megaphone, not a mute button.
So we're here to interrupt the negative narratives
and share the unfiltered truth about reinvention, perimenopause, and everything in between. Just real talk.
Let's
go.
Welcome to today's special edition, Starting at 50, What It Really Takes to Reinvent Yourself. And today we're so lucky to have Martha Bourlakas, an entrepreneur, a mom, and an all-over cool woman. She started her business, Storied Goods, in her kitchen at 50. After stirring joy into a sparkling wine cocktail and decided the world needed more moments like it. And now today, Storied Goods is a woman-owned brand turning simple drinks into rituals worth celebrating. Now it's seen at Bloomingdale's and beyond because bold and sweet really do belong together. Wow. Thank you for being here, Martha. And for listeners meeting you for the first time, we'd love if you could tell us a little bit about who you are and more about Storied Goods.
I'm so excited to be here. This is great. I am Martha Bourlakas, as you said, and I founded Storied Goods. We do gourmet sugar cubes in different flavors for cocktails, mocktails, coffee, and tea. And as you said, Melissa, it started in my kitchen over a champagne cocktail, a traditional champagne cocktail. Although true champagne people don't really like this, but you take sparkling wine, add a sugar cube, and some bitters. I was sharing one with my husband and wanted to know if it could be made more beautiful or more flavorful. So the first sugar cube was with rose petals, and the organic rose petals float on top. And I thought it was such a beautiful experience. I just started experimenting. And we have 3 adult daughters. Our oldest daughter has disabilities and autism. So I spent the large part of my early mom life being a full-time caregiver. My husband's job had the insurance, so it made sense. And then we have 2 neurotypical daughters. And that's who I am. My husband is an Episcopal bishop, so we have moved 13 times. So I'm quite used to reinvention. It's kind of my theme.
That's so cool. And the fact that you started it at 50 in your kitchen, I'd love to just imagine that moment. That moment you were with your husband and you're like, gosh, could this be more bigger and more beautiful? And that moment, what was happening in your life that made like a sign that was the right thing to do?
Yeah, that's such a good question. So at that point, our daughters were older, and Hannah, our oldest, had enough independence at that point in her life. She works, and so there was enough to enable me to have a little bit of smidge of time. And I had always all along had part-time baking businesses and delivered coffee cakes and did cookies for a bed and breakfast and that kind of thing. But I had never had something that was very focused and not just a side hustle. So I started creating this, and I had seen that there was a Best of Virginia competition for many categories, but I thought maybe I've had too much champagne, but actually I really want to enter these products in. So I started the business, entered them into the Best of Virginia, and won in our category. And after that, that was the moment that things really took off. And it wasn't just giving them as gifts to my friends, which I had done. So that was a great moment, winning that and then just keeping on going.
That is so cool. And before that moment, you said you would deliver coffee cakes or whatever, and you had side hustles. Before the moment when you won this competition, what did reinvention mean to you?
I had no more thought about reinvention. I did not think of it as a reinvention. What I did know was that I was not finished. I had a real sense of love being a mom, love doing all the things that I do, really want this for myself. And that came with a lot of challenges in mindset and reality and all that, which I know we'll get into. But in the beginning, it was, I want something for myself that feels like mine.
I love that. I'll hand it over to Anne. She has a few things she wants to ask.
Yeah. So, and we've been talking about, and to your point, it's doesn't necessarily have to be reinvention, but claiming that part of yourself that you felt like you were sacrificing, and not in a bad way, but that there was this unfulfilled destiny or this unfulfilled thing that you wanted to do, that you finally had the time and all the skills that you accumulated over the years as a caregiver, as a task manager for everyone. How many years has it been that since you started the company?
It has been 8 years. We've been 8 years officially. I'm 60 now, and I can't believe it's been that long. And then also, it feels really short.
And the growth over those 8 years, I mean, like Melissa mentioned, being in Bloomingdale's and stuff, that's serious stuff. That's a lot of growth over 8 years.
It is. It is. And there have been periods where our company we really did stay small for the first few years and through the pandemic. And I didn't yet believe that it could be a successful business. Mindset wise, kept it very much as a side hustle in my head and with my family. This is just something I do. And so I really think it took those first 5 years getting past the pandemic to say, okay, this doesn't have to be a side hustle. This is real. And what does real look like?
And do you think, and we've had this conversation, Melissa and I, do you think any part of that, of just classifying it as a side hustle, is almost like a protective mechanism as opposed to putting it out there and being like, this is what I'm doing? Because I think we all have that fear of failure, whatever failure might be
Yes.
like.
Oh my goodness. Yes. The other thing I have contended with is a fear of success. I think it has been much easier in my life I have always believed that I needed to stay small and stay quiet and be the good wife, be the good mom, not because I have a very supportive husband, but just because that's what I was conditioned to do. And starting this business, saying it, coming out and being very forthright is really scary. And yes, it might fail. Also, it might succeed, and you might have to be out there and you might have to be loud and not shrinking. And what does that look like? And I think at times that's been scarier than the fear of failure.
And so how did you get comfortable with being out there then and becoming this bigger individual in terms of a businesswoman?
This
Having to be out there.
expansiveness. Yeah, a lot of mindset work I'm a big believer in it. A lot of coaching. I've always had a business coach, always had a personal coach. But I think there are two sides to it. There are a lot of times that I hear that women say, I'm too old, I can't do that. And I obviously don't agree with that in so many ways. Also, I have experienced that, like, oh my gosh, I do only have these few years, whatever those look like, left. And I want it to be big and I want it to be fulfilling and I want all the things. And so living in both those worlds is what's allowed me to be expansive. I just want this so much. It's just who I am.
And it sounds like it brings you joy and
Ah,
fulfillment.
yes, it brings me so much joy. That does not mean it's easy. It is not. I think all really good things that push you to grow. It's like kids, push you to grow, push you to expand. This business definitely does that. I have learned things I never dreamed I would.
And do you think starting this later in life, the successful company, gave you some advantages because you had tools and resources that maybe a younger version of you wouldn't have had at the time?
Yes, I think, and both of you, I'm sure, agree with this. You don't mess with a mom. When it comes to negotiating, whatever, manufacturing, or just all these things that it takes to have a product-based business, once you've been a mom and you have advocated for your child, especially a child with disabilities, you're like, this doesn't scare me a bit. So I think that's true. And I think just wisdom in general. I used to be very afraid of not being liked. And this has helped me get past that. And so now at 60, I'm like, of course, some people aren't going to like me. That's okay.
Yeah. And it's interesting to start shedding later in life those things that we've been conditioned. Like for me, a people pleaser
Yes.
or the good girl of making sure everybody has what they need and everything. Where the older I've gotten, I'm like, screw that. I'm going to watch out for myself first.
Yes, exactly. It's like you lose the estrogen and then you lose the bullshitting, really do.
Yeah.
So that's so liberating.
Melissa, you want to take the next, and we've touched
Sure.
on some of this
We
about the
did.
fears and emotional side of it, but
We did, and you gave us some of the things we were looking for in terms of fears that came up earlier. You said you had more of a fear of success, which I think is fascinating, more of a fear of success than of failure. And you did talk about doubting yourself a few times. And I'm curious, when you were starting and the business was uncertain and you were still thinking of it as a side hustle, and you said you wanted to be liked, what were the tools that you used to help shift that mindset into, I got this, obviously strong mom, but what are some of those tools that you had to lean into to help you?
Yeah, that's such a good question. And it is definitely not a linear process. I think the tools have been oddly social media, which is not something I love, but being a solopreneur in the beginning, now I have some team to help. Just being forced to put myself out there and look goofy and all those things, that's been one of the tools, is just doing instead of processing and thinking and overthinking and taking a course, which is how I've always handled things. I'll just take one more course or I'll just take one more. So the actual doing of the thing that needs to be done. Finding a support team is critical. And one thing about this tool is not to rely too heavily on the people closest to you. And that sounds so contradictory. But I do think that a lot of people very close to you, for all kinds of reasons, will point out what's wrong with your idea or how it's not going to work. And that's for lots of reasons. Maybe they don't want to see you shift as a mom or whatever. Your best friend is like, well, I kind of always wanted to have a business and that kind of thing. So I think putting your thoughts and your ideas out there with people who are qualified, but not necessarily your soul people. Those are the people you go to for love and encouraging words and that kind of thing. So that's a tool, and still learning. My big thing has been to learn my numbers and to embrace that just because I've always been terrible at math, I've had to learn my numbers. And that has been terrifying and the best tool of all.
I love that. We did a series recently about when you change, others have to change with you. And some people may not like the new you, right? Some people may embrace it. And so, did you have anyone who didn't like this new version of yourself? And you don't have to say the names, but if you did, how did you handle that?
Yeah, that's so good. And one of my favorite coaches always says, really pay attention to what you're jealous of, because it teaches you, and it teaches you what you want for yourself. Why do you want that? Or why do you not want somebody else to have that? What is that? And I just love that framing. It has been really hard with some people, particularly close friends who have known me as Martha before business. I was much more easygoing. I had a lot more time. I was always down for whatever. And now I've really had to learn some boundaries, and I've really had to say, it's not my vibe anymore, and or I can't. I've chosen to do this pop-up tonight. And you really realize the friends who are like, okay, I'm not used to this, but I'm going to come to your pop-up, or I'd love to work with you, or whatever. The people really show themselves, which is growth for everybody. But I won't say it's not hard, and it can be really hurtful.
Yeah, it's definitely hurtful. And sometimes that grief that goes with that loss of what you had, you have to grieve it, let it go, and then embrace that you're being true to yourself.
Absolutely. That gets to that always putting yourself last. And what does it look like finally to put yourself and your desires, and God forbid women even say we have desires, whatever those are, to get out there and say, yes, I am absolutely putting myself first. And the narrative out there is like, that's the worst thing to do. Women don't do that. And I don't want that for myself, and I don't want to model that for our daughters.
I love that. So let's talk a little bit about growth, a little bit more about how this idea went to growth and how you're setting this amazing example for others and your daughters. And I think you have some questions on that one.
Yeah, and some of them we already touched on. So I'll go to the ones that we haven't really touched on. So what would you say, Martha, is one of the hardest practical lessons or experiences when you scaled it from doing that product at home to then outsourcing, or the growth that went with the success of the product?
The hardest thing, without a doubt, is manufacturing. And it's not just because of the logistics. And this part is not fully solved in our business as it is. There are so many bumps, but you're learning a whole new language. It doesn't matter how comfortable you are with it. You're learning like COGS and cost of goods sold, all that language. And you are dealing with a manufacturer. For us, it has been, you're not big enough to take on a huge company, won't take you on. We're basically a candy making process is our manufacturing. So we can't have a huge candy factory. At the same time, we're way bigger than Martha in the kitchen. So that has been the biggest challenge. It continues to be a challenge. And you have to be very bold in that, particularly for a CPG product, a food-based product.
And I would think resilient too. And you're advocating for yourself and keep pushing and saying, no, I'm going to make this work. And I will find the right fit for my
Yes.
product to be manufactured.
Yes. The resilience, I have resilience I never knew I had.
And let me ask you this. This wasn't one of the questions we came up with, but just talking like personally, when I'm dealing with something new and it's outside my comfort zone, I have a lot of anxiety over it. And sometimes that anxiety can almost become paralyzing that I just want to do anything but dive into or deal with that. How would you say when you have those moments of anxiety or self-doubt or like just overwhelmed of, okay, I don't understand this. I need to understand this, of shutting down the anxiety and persevering or pushing through it?
I experienced that too, that same anxiety. And oh my gosh, I immediately go to what would you tell fifth grade Martha, eighth grade Martha sitting in math class? Because that's usually the feeling. I don't understand, but I don't want to ask. What would you tell her right now? And I would tell her, ask, what the hell are you talking about? I don't understand that. And to lose it really is vulnerability and losing the shame or whatever it is that keeps you in that very anxious grip. I always go to that. What would you tell little Martha right now? And I would tell her, you ask whatever question you need to.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And Melissa and I had a podcast on finances and how you don't know what you don't know. And until you look at the thing or ask the questions, the worst thing is to know you're uninformed and continue in that phase of being uninformed, as opposed to stripping something back and saying, I'm going to ask the question. Because I think as soon as you get the answer, the anxiety subsides and you're like, okay, now I know what this is about.
That's right. Even if you don't know what's going to be the next step, you're like, okay, I can deal with this in this moment. And then you move forward. Absolutely.
The only other question in this topic about your growth is, when did you figure out, was there a certain trigger or point where you were like, okay, I have to bring in outside help now, or outside manufacturing, or a team, because this is too big for just me in my kitchen?
So there have been several points along the way. We got in Forbes magazine. We've been in Forbes lists 3 times for best gifts for coffee lovers, that kind of thing.
It's amazing, by the way. That is awesome.
Thank you. They did host a Bridgerton tea party, and so we were part of that, which was very cool. But when the sales increase from that, which is absolutely what you want, I've really seen like, oh my gosh, we don't have enough product, or we can't deliver on time. And those are the pressure points when you say, okay, and it's always a balance because it always costs. So again, you have to look at what is the cost of this, doing it yourself, versus the cost of hiring a team or a 3PL. The Today Show, which was amazing, that happened this past October, just blew us up out of the water. It was amazing. But we couldn't deliver. I had my whole sweet family in packing boxes and doing all this stuff. Fantastic problem to have. Shows you where, again, those pressure points are. That really is learning by walking through the fire.
On that point, Martha, was that the pivotal point that realized, oh my gosh, I can't do this all, I have to hire some more help? Or was it before the Forbes?
It was before that. I was doing all the cubes myself. In Virginia, you can't use a home kitchen, so I was using a certified church kitchen, and the orders were just coming in, and I couldn't do it. And for me, what I've always had to walk through, what I still have to walk through, is high dollar tasks versus lower dollar tasks. So it was getting to be that 80% of my time was doing the task of making cubes, and where it should be doing sales or doing higher level marketing, acting as a CEO. And I think the identity as CEO is still very challenging. And it's something that I still work on. And I think a lot of that has to do with, again, you got to play big. You got to play big.
That's interesting that you say the identity is still challenging of CEO. What about CEO or the word CEO is challenging for you?
I think I have a very corporate view of it. I was a stay-at-home mom in jeans all the time, taking my daughter to therapy, teaching her how to bake, all those kinds of things. So it's just felt like an opposite image. And so I love that because I feel like I can change that image, not just for myself, but for a lot of women. It just so doesn't look one way. And you would think that I would be old enough to know that.
It's funny, and we've talked about this on a previous podcast too, is like you are brought up with these narratives that you don't even realize you're learning from people around you or from society and culture. And so those still stick with us. And some of them we have to get rid of, which it sounds like even CEO, you think corporate or whatever. The reality is, if we could change the word chief executive officer, what would it be? Human officer. Or
Right. Like you. Yes.
experience
I
officer.
love that. Yes.
Or whatever you want.
No, exactly. I think that's so good. I love when I saw on your website that. So I love that. And I think you're right. It is about that identity. Also, in that same space of being who you are, I do think that has been huge for me, is just saying, okay, this is the kind of leader I am. And I think people want different models or different ideas of what that can be, particularly women who are younger than we are.
You're really creating an experience with your product. And I think we'd like to dig in a little bit to that experience, because the word Storied Goods, just the name of your company and the thought of stories and sharing, it's just fascinating.
Thank you.
Can you start by telling us, Martha, how you came up with the company name?
I have always been a writer, and I got my MFA in creative nonfiction. And my thesis and then subsequent book was about what it's like to raise a child with disabilities and how that affects the family and that whole experience. So I have always experienced and known that the stories are how we connect with each other and how we grow from each other. To stay closed in is to keep us from really knowing each other. And I also think it's so relevant right now when people really crave connection, that stories are the way to do that. And so I wanted a name that incorporated hospitality and everybody being welcome at the table. And that's how I came up with that. And I wanted it to be goods because we have some other product ideas in the hopper. So I wanted it to be broad enough that we could not just be sugar if we add other things.
Which is a great thinking 20 steps ahead, seriously,
I hope so.
And then just out of curiosity, what do your daughters think of this? They must think it is just so cool.
They do. They love it. I'm sure they roll their eyes at me, but they're going to do that anyway sometimes. So that's...
We can relate.
Yeah, that's beside the point. They're all very supportive and have done great. They've all had periods in between jobs of doing our social media and doing all that. And it's great. The one thing I did have to let go with my daughters is I really did start out thinking, this is great. I'm going to do this for them so they can take this business one day if they want. And boy, once I shed that and realized I'm not doing it for them, obviously I hope to leave them a legacy and I want a successful business, but this is a journey for me. It is. And that's a heavy burden to put on them. They got to do their own thing.
And then we'll switch back to Melissa, but I'm just thinking here, Martha, at the upcoming wedding, I think you need a specialized cocktail with the sugar cubes.
Okay. And I'm going to let you tell our daughter that. She'll be like, huh?
Hey, it brings in the celebration. It brings
It does.
making people feel welcome. It brings in the
Right.
connection.
They're going to be like, Mom, you don't have to sell 24 hours a day.
And you're not selling, you're sharing your gift with the world.
That's right. Anne, will you be my marketing director, please?
Tell your daughters that a lawyer wants to talk to them about featuring a champagne cocktail at the wedding.
Love.
And their
Love.
daughter getting married can name it whatever she wants to channel all the celebration.
I love it. Cannot wait.
Let us know how that goes over.
Yes, I will.
And as you were saying, things were brewing beyond sugar, and everything in my head is a Broadway musical song because that's all I hear in my home.
I
So
love
all
it.
I thought was sugar, butter, flour, and I'm like, maybe it's gonna be nice.
Oh my God.
Wait
I cannot tell you how that is the signature show in our house.
Anyway.
Yeah, I love it. I love
So
it.
each podcast, Martha, we always like to leave with our listeners some thoughts, maybe some advice, but also some action items. And so before we get to the action items, maybe we can give them some advice from you. And I'd say the first thing is for the women listening who might have an idea, but they keep minimizing it or they keep swallowing it, what would you say to them?
First of all, I would say to believe in your own worthiness and to really mind that out. I think a lot of women believe that they don't deserve the creative time to explore what's tugging them or the little knot in their stomach, and just to take that creative time and whatever speaks to you, whether it's gardening or writing or walking, and just mind that idea for yourself and allow yourself the space to, first of all, believe in your worthiness. And second of all, to say, you know what, this doesn't have to be the be all end all, but it could really give me life and give me joy.
I think to that point, I always go back to, I think feeling the sense of regret if you were passionate about something and not doing it is much worse of the what if, or saying 20 years from now, I wish I would have tried something, but I didn't because either I was too fearful of failure or too fearful of success. But I think when you counteract any fear with the sense of loss people are going to feel if they don't at least try.
Absolutely. In the beginning, I had a lot of weird feelings, doubts about the fact my product is sugar. And sugar is, I have to watch my own health, my own sugar intake, and balancing what I was selling with my belief in being healthy. What I have come to, obviously, maybe just because I had to, but I do believe that our products represent the expansion in a way that women deserve to feel whatever joy, whatever abundance, whatever little indulgence, that's healthy and that's good. And we really celebrate that. So our little indulgence happens to be these little sugar cubes, and we think that sparks joy, but it might be something else.
And to your point on that, though, nobody owes anybody an explanation in terms of you trying to balance, well, it's sugar, but I worry about my health. And is this being counterintuitive where it's like, it
Yes.
brings you joy and you don't know anybody the explanation about how it fits your life other than you love it and you're having fun with it.
Yes. I love that. That's so beautiful. And also, you can't drink Starbucks drinks and then talk to me about sugar. But that, anyway.
Well, really with anything, whatever sodas are out there or kids
Yeah.
drinking those Quirks or the Red Bulls or
I know.
whatever that make
I
me
know.
just want to gag in my mouth. talking about things, but
Exactly.
And for me, the fake sugar or whatever makes
Yeah.
me feel nauseous.
Yes, definitely. Yeah.
I'm curious if you could sit down with your 50-year-old self one day, what would you tell her?
I would say, first of all, I am so proud of all you've done so far. I think that the self-compassion is really important to me and for me. And I would say, you know what? This is not going to be perfect and it's not going to be smooth. And that doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. And it goes to, and what you're saying about just because somebody else says something or because the ride is bumpy, you're worthy of doing it and trying it. And also, it's going to be so much fun. It's going to be so much fun. And the people you meet are going to be amazing.
and I think through trial and error, it's not failure, it's that you pivot.
Yeah, it is.
It's experimenting to figure out what works best.
Exactly. And I had brain surgery in January. I found out through an eye exam that I had a tumor. And so all of a sudden I had to get this taken out. And my first fear was the business. I was like, oh, I don't want to lose my business, or I don't want to be able not to come back to my business. And that's another thing I would tell myself at 50, you're going to endure some hard things. And then you're also going to see the level of support. And then you're going to come back and you're going to fill orders and it'll be great.
That's beautiful. And I'm glad you're doing so well.
Thank you. Me too.
So Mel, do you want to do some action items and we can
Sure. Yeah. We always
allow
take our
Martha to go back to her successful business?
Oh
Yes.
gosh, I would talk to y'all all day.
This was amazing.
So fun.
I think you've told us what you're most proud of, not in the business, but in yourself. But if you could sum that up in one word, what would you say?
What I'm most proud of with the business?
No, in yourself.
Oh, in myself. I think in my courage and risk taking. I've always taken risks like I've never done it, but skydiving, things like that. I love those kinds of risks. This is different because it's sustained and I'm betting on myself. And that's the biggest risk of all for me.
But there's nobody better to bet on.
That's what I keep telling myself day after day. I do think that's true. And I really have found out how reliable I am. Reliable for the things that matter. Yeah, the soul work, all that.
Yeah. And showing up for yourself every day.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we are going to ask the listeners for their action item this week, and we put this on our Instagram, to come up with their own sentence or their mantra to empower themselves to start something new. So before we ask them to do that, what's one sentence that you want to share with every midlife woman or any person listening today, that when they walk away from this podcast after hearing your story, what's that sentence you want them to hear?
Allow yourself to be expansive and abundant. Just allowing yourself to feel and to experience. And yeah, that's what I would say.
And We're going to also put this on our Instagram, but if you go to storied-goods.com, use the word podcast and you'll get a discount, I believe. Right,
Yes.
Martha?
Code
And I can
podcast.
attest to these sugar cubes. They're amazing. They are great in champagne. They are great in bourbon. My husband has had the orange one, and I'm sure there are new flavors I haven't tried, but storied-goods.com, word podcast.
Yes. And our Instagram is at storied_goods. It should be the same as our website, but it's not. We love, obviously, we love to hear from everybody, and we love pictures and celebrations and anything you want to share. And we have a new website that should be up in the next week, actually. So you sign up for emails and you'll get goodies and all kinds of things.
That's awesome. And you just don't stop, Martha, do you? You're like, and now we're going to raise the bar again. And it's a new website.
We are doing lots of we have lots of partnerships coming up. So subscription boxes we are going to be part of, and collaborations, which is fantastic. The relationships are everything to me in this.
And the relationships, of course, are the product's great, but the relationships because of you. And nobody's going to, and I tell my kids this all the time, nobody is going to want to give opportunities to people who aren't genuinely good people and put themselves out there. You could be the smartest person in the world, and if you're a jerk, nobody's going to want to collaborate with you. So not only is it a good product, but that's a testament to you as an individual with people wanting to collaborate.
That's kind of you to say. That's the whole purpose, I think, the relationship building.
And if only more people would think about that, the world would be a much better place, right?
Go start your business.
Yes. So, all right, Mel, are we tying this up so
We
Martha can
are.
get back to her?
Yes. So thanks for joining us on Midlife Interrupted and Unfiltered. If this episode hit home, share it with a friend who needs to hear it.
And subscribe so we can keep interrupting your week with real talk,
You can find us on Instagram at the.interruption.
where we're continuing the conversation and building this community together.
Until next time, keep interrupting those narratives.
And stay unfiltered.
See you next
Next
week.
week.